December 27th, 2025. Wow, the year is coming to an end here. And the topic of this one is that President Zelensky of Ukraine is coming to the United States to meet with President Trump to discuss the ongoing peace plan and I guess to make another step forward. As we know that the Ukrainians came out with a 20-point response to, I guess, the peace initiatives that we've been trying to negotiate. And so I guess this is the idea to kind of maybe finalize something to go back to the Russians with. And I don't know whether at this time whether Trump is going to agree with the 20-point plan or is going to try to modify it in some way. I know Daniel Davis yesterday did a rundown of what the plan was and kind of where it's heading to. And, of course, he has a certain attitude as well. From what I can see, there really is a big gap still between where the Russians are and the Ukrainians. And it's not as big as Western media would have you believe, because I think that Western media goes with this bogus idea that Russia is looking for unconditional surrender or something, and that's not the case at all. However, there are a lot of issues that each side, wants security guarantees, and we don't seem to think in terms of Russia wanting security guarantees. But if Russia hadn't felt some threat, I don't think they'd have put themselves through what they've gone through the last nearly 4 years in terms of sanctions and loss of personnel and economic damage. Even if you want to assume that the worst of the Russian leadership, you'd have still say that the economic damage they've had in terms of their navy and their oil refinery facilities and tankers and so forth. I mean, obviously they're paying a price too. However, Ukraine is paying a bigger price. I think that's also clear. There's a lot of devastation there, and as the war continues, the Russians are pursuing a variety of attacks. And for the most part, Russia has the initiative, except that that's what Kupiansk is how you pronounce it, the area kind of in the north there on the northeastern side of the front, where apparently the Russians kind of let their guard down and the Ukrainians managed to pull a little surprise on them and for the moment have pushed them back a bit there. Otherwise, they seem to be pretty much in trouble all across the line otherwise. So it is, one of those kind of situations. And of course, there's a massive ongoing attacks that are going in, trying to basically knock out the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. They're also trying to sever lines of communication between the Odessa region and the bulk of Ukraine up, north through all the major cities up to Kyiv and so forth, where most of their people are. So this is an ongoing situation. So the question is, will the Russians and the Ukrainians still come to an agreement? I tend to think there's still too big of a gap at the moment. But one of the big things is that the Ukrainians are still demanding to have an 800,000 person army. And one of the reasons I think the Russians are not too keen on that is that means that they would have to maintain a very large army too. Remember that 800,000 is bigger than the Russian army was before the war broke out. And that's costing them a lot of money to do that, particularly with volunteer troops as opposed to conscripts. So I think that's one of the reasons that there's going to be a big disagreement. And the other thing is there's just a complete lack of trust on the part of both sides. Certainly Ukraine doesn't trust Russia. Russia doesn't trust us either. It's not just they don't trust. I think not they just don't trust Ukraine. They don't trust us either. If you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe, or click the bell for notifications, or you can follow me on Rumble as I post there as well. Yeah, so that's the way I see it at the moment. On the other hand, there's this idea that there's this ongoing threat that we're going to drop on them that will make them yield. And we'll just have to see what comes to this meeting and then what actions Trump takes after that. Presumably, whatever comes out of this meeting will probably be presented to the Russians, and then there'll be probably another round of negotiations, would be my guess. I doubt they're just going to flat out accept it. So I think the size of the Ukrainian military is one big thing. There are territorial issues also. The thing that may be a step forward in this that might work is the idea that there's a create a fairly large demilitarized zone in which the military positions of both sides would be removed and brought back behind the zone, and then presumably somewhere in a line in the middle of this, there would be a area where Russian administration would occur. It's like such as police forces and things of that sort, uh, you know, paramilitary level stuff, but not the major military. And on the same thing true on the Ukrainian side, their police forces and so forth would be in there doing civil administration, but they wouldn't actually have their army there. And the armies of both sides would be pulled back a significant distance. That seems to be one of the aspects of this plan. We'll see if that will prove to be acceptable or not. Kind of a face-saving way for both sides. However, remember, the Ukraine had been demanding the Russians completely withdraw to the pre-91 border. So, and the question is, would any of this be a permanent deal or would this be a temporary deal? The other aspect I find very disconcerting is this whole, Article 5 like security guarantees for Ukraine. That means we're committing ourselves to go to war with Russia. I don't think we should go to war with Russia. I mean, if we're going to go to war with Russia, then why aren't we already at war with them? In other words, why are we holding back now, but later on we're going to? I think it's a guarantee that's not all that credible, really, on the one hand, and on the other hand, has the potential, if it is credible, for the Ukrainians to create some kind of a conflict and then try to claim the Article 5 type guarantee to get us into a war with Russia in order to retake the land they lost. In other words, I'm less concerned about Russia breaking the deal, actually, if they make one, if they really come to where they honestly make a deal, than I am really of Ukraine breaking it, because Ukraine would be doing it more or less under duress, I think, relatively speaking, at the present time. And so I tend to think because it would be under duress, there would be a lot of anger and willingness to at some point break the deal and restart a war, particularly in this peace period, particularly if they have an 800,000 man army and if presumably billions of dollars of Western weapons bought by the Europeans flood into that area, including tactical aircraft, more missiles, more armored vehicles, more weapons of all sorts. They're going to feel they'll have time to actually train their troops rather than just conscripting them off the street and throwing them into battle, as it often happens over there. Would be to actually train this up to be a very effective military. And then the Russians might have a real problem on their hands. And if they get this war started, and if we have to enter it too, you can see how that would lead to a real calamity. So anyhow, that's kind of my viewpoint. But we'll see what comes of this meeting with Trump and what happens next. So that's one of the main points we're looking at here. On other topics, Trump has just recently released a plan to create a whole new fleet of ships, which are going to be called, I guess, the Trump-class battleships. I guess they're really going to have a BB designation. If people know the naval designation, maybe it'll be BBG for battleship guided missile or something. I don't know. At any rate, this has been proposed, and I haven't really heard what the pushback is, but these will be fairly large and expensive ships, and we'll see how Congress reacts to this plan. I mean, it's an interesting idea. I saw one online commentary named Alex Hollings that does a lot of defense commentary and stuff, and he was pointing out an issue which I think is kind of significant, is that that we're going with a battleship approach. We're concentrating all this firepower in relatively smaller number of vessels, where if we had more, let's say, cruiser level ships, which might be half the mass or maybe even let's say a third of the mass, but would have a fairly high number of missiles on each of them, you might have a situation where you'd have be able to carry out more missions, that is, cover more area. And also, if you lose one of them, you're not losing as much of an asset as you would if you lose one of these battleships. And that's unclear to me whether the cruiser level ships would be that much more vulnerable, really. The key thing would be the new technologies that are being discussed being integrated in any case. Um, one distinction is that the historic battleships, like we had back in World War I and II, let's think of I guess, the New Jersey and the Missouri and the Iowa, Wisconsin, those heavy battleships. One of the reasons they were so big is the armament they had was a large, 16-inch gun, and there was like 9 of these guns and 3 turrets, and you have to have a very substantial ship to actually field this kind of ordnance. Whereas, regardless of whether we have a battleship, a cruiser, or a destroyer, we're still going to be using the same basic vertical launch tubes that are going to carry basically the same missiles. Tomahawks, standard anti-aircraft missile, an ASROC type anti-submarine missile, and the Harpoon anti-ship missiles, and so forth. And so basically, you don't need a giant ship. Any of these classes can carry the missiles. It's just that the bigger ship could carry more missiles. So, and it's a question of how you want to package that thing. So we'll see how that turns out. We'll be interesting to see how it goes through the Navy and all that. My own thought is that at this point, this is more of a conceptual design than it is a detailed, evolved design, which really has been staffed through a lot of experts and so forth. And that will take time to work all those details. Let's see what ends up happening. And so that's a big development. And finally, of course, Trump has just launched an attack on these ISIS type operatives that are existing inside of Nigeria, with I guess 12 Tomahawk cruise missiles at their various bases to send them a little Christmas present, I guess. So at any rate, hopefully that sends them a message to quit attacking Christians. We'll see how that all plays out also. And of course, the battle with the Venezuelan drug boats continues, and the Democrats are continuing to oppose this. However, it seems to me like they're taking the wrong side of this issue. Perhaps the main issue is they're concerned that Trump would actually launch a ground invasion of Venezuela, which I don't think he's going to do, but we'll see what happens. There may very well be some strikes against ground targets in Venezuela, which is a different thing than literally invading the country. But we'll see how that plays out as well. So all for now, I will be posting this on YouTube and Rumble as always, and the addresses of my social media accounts are in the description below, and you can follow me there. I post most frequently short comments on X, where I'm generally reacting to other people and so forth. So all for now.